again, the educational piece is not out there, that not everybody's getting this. And then suddenly you're persecuted and you're put in a prison cell for 24 hours. And you're treated in a really wrong way. For me, it's about safety. It's really about the safety of the patients. I found it mind-blowing. There's so much knowledge and information there, but we're not sharing it. Patients don't know about it. You know, I spoke to my parents. I told them about medical cannabis. I'd started a new job. I was passionate and interested in it. And actually, my mum was the perfect person that medical cannabis would work for. But she's in her early 70s and she's like, there's no way I'm touching drugs. Welcome to Life in Focus, a series by Lyphe, the UK's most established medical cannabis clinic, dedicated to helping patients navigate treatment safely, confidently, and with the support they deserve. I'm Karen, Managing Director at Lyphe, and I'm delighted to introduce this new series where we explore the world of medical cannabis, discuss the evolving challenges and opportunities in the sector, and share stories that put patients first. Today I'm joined by Paul North, Director of Voltaface and the founder of Synergy Podcast Studio here on the South Coast, where we're recording this series. In this episode, we'll talk about how Lyphe supports patients through every stage of their treatment journey, from consultation and prescription to follow-up and ongoing care, and how we're working to make medical cannabis simple, safe, and supportive for everyone.
Great to talk to you, Karen. Really interested in exploring the conversation today. To kick things off, could you just talk to us a little bit about where Lyphe is at the moment? Because Lyphe's obviously a clinic that I can remember back in like 2018 when the sector first kicked off. So where's the company at the moment?
So we've had a journey. We've had a very big journey. So we obviously started out in 2018 as one of the first clinics, medical cannabis clinics. We've seen many changes happen throughout the industry. We have built on our experiences. We've learned lots of new things. We've hit some lows and we've hit some highs. Now, currently, I've recently taken over as the managing director, having worked in the clinic for the past 2 years on the governance side of things. So I'm coming in with fresh eyes, with a fresh look on things and looking at how we make things better, it's going to be very difficult for us to compete with other clinics in the industry, but we're going to focus primarily on safety and education. So that's currently where we're at now.
I agree 100% that being around for so long is a real strength. Why do you mentioned there about like not be able to compete? What do you mean by that? Can you talk a bit more about that?
So there's a lot of clinics now that have opened up in the last few years with huge investments, and they are able to offer patients very cheap prices, lots of incentives to onboard. We're not in that position. We can be quite competitive, but we can't be crazy because we have really good clinical consultants on board. We work with a team of consultants. We work with a team of prescribers. And unfortunately, all of those things have costs. We can't compromise on our care and our clinical services because, to do it cheaper, we can do it as cost effectively as we can, but we can't beat those really low if we want to keep the quality, of doctors.
Yeah. I kind of been worried for a while about a bit of a race to the bottom with the industry in terms of prices. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate, if you're in the industry, obviously you're kind of aware of it, but people outside the industry don't really appreciate what has gone on and what is going on around some clinics that can just operate at unbelievable losses.
Yeah.
Just to try and capture and dominate the whole market. And I get that. I'm not by any means kind of like anti-corporation, anti-capitalist, like, it's a regulated, sensible market, but I have for a while had this fear about the implications of that for the sector. It doesn't feel like a particularly good thing for companies to be able to do that.
No, it's really difficult. And it's difficult kind of watching it as well because, as much as we want to, get the patients through the door and we want to help and we want to educate and we want to give them what they need, which is pain relief or other types of relief, we can't do it. But also if I was a patient looking at this, I might be inclined to go with the best deal and the cheapest deal, particularly if I can't afford it, because it's not a cheap market. You know, when you're paying for a legalized medical cannabis prescription, it's expensive, you know, and people can't afford that. So they want their reduced costs anywhere else. But for me, as somebody that's really into sort of compliance and patient care, is I want to know that my patients can have the best consultants. You know, they've achieved a lot within their industry. They know medical cannabis, and that does all come with a cost. And whilst we can offer other things to try and mitigate, you know, the higher costs, it's, for me, it's about safety. It's really about the safety of the patients.
Yeah. So what do Lyphe do with regards to that then? Because, you know, your background's really relevant and interesting here, isn't it? Like, there's a strong compliance background. So, like, what do kind of Lyphe do to help with that process?
So we're quite strict. We're quite strict, I guess, in the industry. And so our patients will tell us, you know, we are making sure that we are seeing the right patients. We're not taking on anybody that wants a cannabis prescription. We are strict in the qualifying eligibility criteria. We're strict that we require the documents from the patient's NHS to make sure that we're not missing anything. We're strict that we constantly communicate with their NHS providers. Every time a patient will come and see us for a consultation, we will send copies of that consultation, because we want them to be as informed as we are with that patient care. And to make sure there's no contraindications, or to make sure we're not missing anything crucial in their medical history that would mean a prescription might not be safe for them. So we are strict on that. We're also strict on how much medication we might prescribe. We don't go crazy high THCs. You know, we don't feel that that is a safe option. You know, we obviously do THC prescriptions, and, you know, we do sort of middle, higher range, but we don't do the crazy high THCs, because the medical benefit from that is not always indicated. I'm not saying that it is in some people, yes, but in the majority, it's not indicated.
And I guess we're kind of talking about, like, if people want that, it's out there.
Oh, it's absolutely out there.
It's
just not out there for us, for our clinic. You know, by all means, there's plenty of clinics out there that, you know, will let you have those options. But for us, it's about making sure that we are safe and we're doing things the right way.
I feel like there's quite a good opportunity there. Because to be frank, some people hear that are maybe using those, like, higher quantities and kind of might disagree and think, well, I think, well, that's fine, because there are clinics out there providing those services. It's not Lyphe or nothing. Like, go. You know, it's a free market. Go wherever you choose to go. I think there's a really interesting conversation around the reality of the medical cannabis sector. For a lot of people, is really unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us that work in it and work around it, or medical cannabis patients, probably feels quite normal by now. But to approach someone who would benefit from a medical cannabis prescription, who's never used cannabis before, or maybe they have when they, you know, it's kind of a passive relationship with it, and go, right, for this condition that you have, here's a flower. You're going to grind this flower, and then you're going to put it in this vape, and then you're going to use it as per the doctor's instructions.
It's mind blowing.
And I mean, and even then, the people are often like, well, how much of the vape? Well, you know, it's not quite as clear cut as it is taking a tablet. So it's this whole conversation, whole process that immediately feels very unfamiliar to people and quite daunting. And there's got to be a market there for appropriately engaging that group.
There's a huge education piece that needs to be done. You know, I had no idea about medical cannabis before I came into this field. I was a kid. I knew that cannabis was around. I might have tried it when I was, you know, late teens, but it was not something that I then really touched after that. And then I came into this industry and I was blown away. I was blown away by the fact that I didn't know anything about it, but also how much information is not really out there for patients, you know. So I've found it, you know, as somebody that's got a real interest in healthcare, I found it mind-blowing. There's so much knowledge and information there, but we're not sharing it. Patients don't know about it. You know, I spoke to my parents, I told them about medical cannabis. I'd started a new job. I was passionate and interested in it. And actually, my mum was the perfect person that medical cannabis would work for. But she's in her early 70s, and she's like, there's no way I'm touching drugs. But she's in so much pain and had all these other medications and, chronic illness for many years, but the stigma attached to cannabis. So how do we tell people about this? How do we educate people that there isn't the stigma around it now? So that's something that we want to really push for education.
And I think it's a really important point to kind of make that process for people not overly complicated. It needs to be something that someone such as your mum would see and find and not be freaked out at any point, not find it daunting, be kind of handheld for a process. And I guess that's the kind of opportunity point I think that you mentioned previously, that there are a lot of companies and organisations who are approaching the sector and basically going, how do we pump as much money into this as quickly as possible to just go for a pure numbers game and get as many patients as we possibly can? And there's obviously demographics that you can target there to achieve that, but there is a much more interesting conversation around, okay, fine, that's going on. Where are the people in the UK who would benefit from this medicine, who we can just have a bit more care around in terms of what that looks like, and a little bit more attention to ironing out some of those bumps in the road, as it were, because I think there must be a lot of people who kind of get thrown into the medical cannabis world and are just instantly confused. Just find it so overwhelmingly complex. And again, there is an interesting debate around, open a bit of a can of worms, MHR regulation, strain names, and there is this very interesting, complex, nuanced blurring of what's recreational, what's medical. Get all that, that's fine. You could spend hours talking about that and discussing it. But the fact is, most people that would benefit from medical cannabis in the UK will be confused. But we'll look at it and go, what is this? This is like nothing else that exists in our healthcare system. Wow. Yeah. Please help me navigate this. I'm so confused.
My prescription says Girl Scout cookies. I mean, it doesn't sound very medical, does it?
It doesn't sound very medical.
It doesn't sound very medical at all. And, the thought of my mum getting a prescription that said Girl Scout cookies, it's just bizarre. But we looked at my mum's case and we talked amongst the team. We said, what can we do? How can we make this? How can we navigate this better for people that are not in the social media generation, that are not as tech aware? So actually, we were like, right, let's introduce something let's give them prescribers. So we have a team of independent prescribers. Let's get them to touch point with our patients once they've had that initial consultation, just to find out, how are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you okay with how you use that prescription? Do you want any guidance? Is there anything we can do to support you? Have you had any side effects? Have you had any strange feelings? And just that person that's got a bit of medical knowledge that can just assure them that it's okay. How you're feeling, it's okay. Before they then meet with their consultant again 2 weeks later. Yeah,
I think that's a really, really, really important part of the process. I can see that benefiting patients hugely.
Yeah.
You don't want people to be having experiences that they really need some help around and saving it for a doctor's appointment, which we know is valuable. That's not a kind of process that you want people to follow. You don't want people sat waiting on something.
Yeah, and we didn't want it to feel like it was a clinical appointment, more how are you?
Yeah.
They're not the consultant. They're not going to be changing. They're just there to kind of guide them on navigating the next step and how that's gone for them. And I think it's really important. But also, there is a big piece for that older demographic. How can we support those people? Because, everything is online now. You sign up online, you communicate online, you have bots for this and bots for that, and, you might speak to humans. So we're putting together something that is for helping people that are not tech savvy, that one-to-one personalised approach, somebody that they can call up, I'd like to speak to Becky because Becky's the person that I deal with. It makes it more personal for them. So that's something that we're doing also.
Yeah, that's great. I like the sound of that. Is there anything else you think that Lyphe are doing at the moment or are planning on doing that kind of help that process with patients and maybe bring in some of those demographics and groups that we've highlighted?
I think that, education is always going to be our key point. How do we educate people? We're educating through blogs, for podcasts. We're going to do more talking pieces. We're going to reach out to veterans. We've got military nurses that work with us. We're going to get them to go out and speak to communities, local GP practices, and go out and actually have real conversations and discuss, illnesses or, something that somebody might have where medical cannabis may help.
Yeah, I love that. Not only because I own a podcast studio and like I believe heavily in the power of organisations just going straight to patients and taking responsibility for educating people and helping them navigate the sector. I think that is so important, but particularly medical cannabis, because the government have done none of that. There's been legalisation in 2018, and then what efforts were made to educate the public appropriate. I mean, you go on the Talk to Frank website, don't even mention medical cannabis. And for most people, that's kind of like, you want to learn, if someone's got cannabis, I'm going to learn about cannabis.
There's
the government's own website doesn't even mention that it's a legally prescribed product through private clinics, which is wild. So I think it really is, for me, the responsibility of the industry to go, okay, cool, let's go have some of these conversations then. Let's go and find avenues for education in a world which me and you've kind of talked off camera about, kind of the Google game and how Google's changed.
Yeah. And people's normal routes to access information has just been hijacked by Google. You can't go in a search engine anymore and type something and get an honest response. What the response you get from Google is like, well, here's who's giving us the most money. Yeah, exactly. Sponsored. Yeah.
That's not very helpful if you want to navigate something and like find out what's right for you.
But now in this new landscape of AI and, all these new softwares that are coming through, with your chat GPTs and things like that, where do we're very restricted in what we can talk about from a marketing side with medical cannabis. There's so many don'ts and there's not a lot of you cans, so we're already on the back foot with this, being able to talk about it. So the only way we can talk about it is to get out there and physically speak about it. Yeah. We're not restricted then.
And I think that's one of the strengths of the series and the channel, is to kind of just start honest, open conversations to help people navigate the sector, because there is a real gap there.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think, and that's the main way that people absorb and engage with information now, isn't it? And I hope that more and more people start to realise what Google are doing, and more and more people start to realise that whatever you put in that Google search bar is just taking you to whoever is giving you the most money. That is not a path to appropriate education.
But this is the problem. This is where we're stuck now. People don't know. People don't know that actually your Google search is actually mainly sponsored ads that are coming up that people have paid the money. Yeah. Whereas your average Joe wants an honest answer. They trust in these platforms, but they're not getting honest answers now. They're getting contrived.
Yeah, agree. And that's one of the things we want to do with the channel, is just get people on to have honest, open conversations about the sector and share their expertise, patients to share their experiences, and just help people navigate it a little bit.
Yeah, that's really good.
I'm glad. I've thought for a while, like, there is a really good opportunity to grab that, and I'm glad Lyphe are doing it, because you kind of mentioned it earlier on in the conversation that Lyphe have been. I think Lyphe is like was the first clinic. Is Lyphe the longest running?
Yes, I think
we'll
so.
fact check ourselves and just edit this out if I'm incorrect.
Yeah,
but I think it was number. If it's not, it was right up there.
It was, yeah.
What do you think some of the main things that Lyphe have learnt then through that process? What are the kind of main learnings from the time that have been in the sector?
I think we've learned a lot more about medical cannabis as an industry. I think we've learned a lot more about what our patients want. I think we've learned a lot about people's ignorance in it, certainly in terms of, I don't know if I can say this now, but police. Police and medical cannabis and people getting arrested, because my role before this new role, it has been compliance. I deal a lot with subject access requests, and a lot of them are from courts and police of people that have been arrested because they've had a medical cannabis on them. But actually, they've had a legitimate prescription, but there's that, again, the educational piece is not out there, that not everybody's getting this. And then suddenly you're persecuted and you're put in a prison cell for 24 hours. And you're treated in a really wrong way. For the same as if you had, I can't think of a medication at the moment, but again, it's a...
Yeah. I think that's, again, I blame that at the foot of the government. I've had conversations with Home Office over the years, multiple conversations where I've kind of gone, you're basically wasting taxpayers' money because you're just arresting people who've got legal prescriptions. You're wasting police time. Mm-hmm. You're creating legal bills for everybody, and you're making people feel really rubbish, and you run a risk of pushing people back into illicit markets, because there's a lot of people who've moved into the medical cannabis market and gone, okay, cool, now this is good because it's legal, I'm not going to get arrested. And then you still see stories of people getting arrested for completely legal possession.
But not just people arrested, people losing their jobs.
Yeah,
if employers are finding out that their employees have got a medical cannabis prescription, which is legal.
Yeah.
This is legal and approved, but they're losing their jobs. I've had to fight for this for, several of our patients. And it's the same as you having an opioid prescription. Is that any more wrong? That affects you the same way. So why would this person lose their job and that person not? And again, it's that piece of education that nobody knows.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of hope that as the sector does more education pieces and it becomes a little bit more mainstream, even just people's acknowledgement that, like, okay, cool. I was in a talk in Cambridge Uni last week, mm-hmm. and I remember saying to the kids, like, someone could possess cannabis flower and it'd be completely legal, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
They're all just looking at each other being like, what? No, you can't.
Yeah.
It's like, you can. Someone could possess cannabis flower completely legally and not, not be committing a single crime. People are like confused by it. So yeah, I think that's good. So you're kind of saying that kind of Lyphe have learned a lot around, just.
Yeah, we've learned a lot around the sort of legality side of things. We've learned a lot marketing side of things, but we've learned a lot from our patients. Our patients have taught us a lot. They have helped us navigate the field. We've learnt by our mistakes. I think that if you look at us now compared to us 3 years ago, we're a lot more strict in how we do things. We're a lot more robust. We're a lot more patient-focused and patient-centric. Like I said, we've got great clinicians, but actually our patients equally have as much of a voice. We want to listen. We want to understand. We want to feel your pain. We want to help you with that. And the more we talk and understand, the more we can change the way we do things for the benefit of everybody. It's everybody's in a business to make money. You don't go into a business if you don't anticipate to make some money. We don't make a lot of money in the cannabis industry. We make money through product, but we're not one of those clinics that want to pump you with product. We're really strict on what we give you. So we're restraining ourselves, but we want to do what's right.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you're trying to do the right thing rather than try to just make as much money as quickly as possible. And I guess that the sector, as we mentioned previously in the conversation, like the sector has just reached a point where if you don't have the unlimited money cheat, as I call it, then you have to play a different game. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing for patients that go with the clinics that are doing that, because patients suddenly become a very valuable resource. Becomes very precious.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we want to do this right for a patient rather than
Just get them in.
Just get people, just get, what do people want? Yeah, whatever. Just get it down. Just get everything as low as possible and just pile the sector, and in some ways that might help the sector grow, which is fine. That's, it is a numbers game in the medical cannabis sector, and the more people that are aware of it, the more it'll grow, the more they'll tell someone else. For every one patient, they'll let 8 people know that they're then a patient, and then, that might create 2 more patients, blah, blah, blah. So that's good. But I really do think there is a area of the sector which is about doing things a little bit differently and try to engage clients who maybe don't fit into some of those demographics that are just being swept up.
Yeah, and there's no one shoe fits all. It's that everybody is different. Everybody has their own story to tell, and we want to hear it.
Yeah.
We're not tarnishing everybody with the same brush. We're not treating everybody the same way. Everybody is different, and we want to hear about it. So we've also learned, like I said, we're strict. We're very compliant in how we do things. We have this high user group, which is not necessarily liked by a lot of our patients. If somebody's over a certain amount of THC in their product, we do a peer review. So we have all the doctors and we discuss that patient, a bit like an MDT. And we discuss whether there is clinical rationale for that patient to have that higher quantity in THC or higher quantity in flower. But it's a group discussion, and it's done based on the safety of that patient. Now, like I said, it's not always liked, but actually, if you look at the bigger picture on this, it's about us being safe. It's about making sure that we are treating that patient the right way, not to give them a higher prescription or a higher quantity if they don't need it.
What's your kind of take on MHRA's oversight of the sector with regards to some of those things? Do you think this is kind of like, I agree with what you're saying around the safety there. That's a very safety-led approach, which it's a clinic, it's a medical.
Yeah,
that all sounds very sensible. But there is this sort of like looming threat of the MHRA over the sector as well, and I think we'll have both, or anyone in the sector will have seen some clinics flying a slightly different flag in terms of their practices and what they're doing. Do you kind of think that the future of the medical cannabis market will have to fit within those parameters?
As in the sort of labelling and the naming of products?
Yeah.
Listen, I think I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that, to have a medical name for a medical product makes sense. It makes sense. It's the same scenario as my mum having Girl Scout cookies as opposed to V3 or something. It's an abbreviated name, but it just doesn't sound like it's a street product or an illicit product. It sounds like it's medical. I prefer the more medical sounding products, because I think that if you're out anywhere and you're not using these street strain names, you're using a medical name. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's the same product. It comes from the same plant.
I like this element. I just like choice with it. I think like if people want that, it exists, go for it. But I think there is an untapped potential of people that would find that a bit weird. Seen a strain name called Girl Scout cookies. I think a lot of people would be like, I'm not sure that doesn't sound and feel like medicine. I think most of the market is probably easier accessed by medicalisation of the sector and the market.
There's still a huge base though of people that are ex-street users that are now in the medical cannabis market, who actually probably know a lot more about the products than we probably do as clinicians or as clinics. And it's just about, we want to look after these people also, if they're eligible for medical cannabis, but we also need to remember that this is a medication. It's a legal medication now, so we need to conform with the legal side of things.
So Karen, you're the managing director of Lyphe. How did you end up the MD of Lyphe? What's your kind of background and story?
Well, there's the story. So I joined Lyphe a couple of years ago. I think it's over 2 years ago now. So I came in as the registered manager. So my background is healthcare. I've worked in private GP practices. Started off in my 40s just answering the phones, and then moved on to becoming a registered manager and really took an interest in the compliance side and CQC. So I'm one of those CQC nerdy types, but I love it. So I worked in private clinics on Harley Street, and then was doing the kind of London back and forth every day with 3 kids and thought, this is a bit crazy. I needed a bit more of a work-life balance. And then saw a job opening for Lyphe Clinic. And I went for an interview, found out it was medical cannabis, had no idea. A really good MD at the time who interviewed me sent me loads of podcasts and videos on it. And then I thought, wow, this is really interesting. So I went in as the registered manager, and then because I'm really interested in the clinical side of things, started working more closely with the doctors, and then ended up looking after all the doctors. So that became my responsibility. So then my job then became head of clinical governance. So I was there doing that for the past year and worked really closely with the previous managing director. And unfortunately, she was leaving the company, and she asked me if I would step into her golden shoes. So I've taken on the job as managing director, which is a huge step. It's quite overwhelming. There's a lot to learn, but I still maintain my clinical governance side and the registered manager's side. I don't want to let that go. I'm really about the patients and the patient journey and the safety. So I'm not letting anybody else have that bit. So I'm keeping that too.
Sounds like you're well suited to keep hold of that, though. I imagine that's one of the hardest jobs in the sector is the CQC element, compliance part. I can't think of a more challenging area.
I've been really fortunate in my experience with CQC. I've always had really good people that have helped me in the CQC. You know, I've had a couple of inspections in various roles, and I've always found it really positive experiences. Whereas I know a lot of other people say it's been horrific. For me, have never had a problem and always found them really helpful. And actually, I spoke to one of our CQC inspectors or liaisons not that long ago through Lyphe. And again, she was so helpful. Anything that I am unsure about, I pick up the phone and I call them. And she gives me the advice. And it's perfect.
Why do you think a lot of organisations, clinics do struggle so much with CQC in the sector? Why do you think there are so many challenges and problems?
Because CQC, it's a bit like Ofsted for kids. It's about doing things the right way. So if you're doing things the right way in the first instance, you've got nothing to worry about. If you're not doing things the right way and you're not maintaining audits and policies or patient safety, then they're going to come down on you, and they're going to come down hard. You know, we are in medical cannabis. We are unknown in terms of normal healthcare. There's a lot that the CQC don't really know. They're still navigating this field. So, unfortunately, it's an industry that can be abused.
So looking forward with Lyphe, then now you've sort of in this role, what bits are you particularly excited about? Challenges or areas of development that you see that you're excited about for the company?
I'm really excited about how we can develop our processes for getting people on board. I'm really excited about working more closely with patients and having that much more personalised, bespoke service, because I think that's missing. I want to be working with our marketing and create personalised videos. So actually when you join up, you get something from us that says, you know, this is what we're doing for you. This is what you should expect. This is like a bit like your diary of how things will go. Our videos on how you use the product, how you work it, you know, everything is really clearly documented so that you're never in doubt. And you can always just pick up the phone and speak to Becky or Rachel or Jasmine and speak to them and have that person.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of people being able to see. Because again, it must be just one of those things. It must be quite intimidating if you're not familiar with flower products, medical cannabis, like what to do when everything's. You must get like a description from the doctor, but it would be amazing to see video.
Yeah, absolutely. Like almost like a little cartoony type video. It doesn't, you know, it could be anything. But even, you know, if you're told to take your oils sublingually, do you know what sublingually means? There's lots of people that would not have a clue what that means. So we want to show you, you know, we want to give you a little videogram of what that looks like and make it so you are not having that fear of the unknown and don't know what to expect. If we can allay your fears and give you the answers before you even know the questions, great.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. And it goes back to the conversation we're having around targeting the demographic of people that maybe don't automatically think of medical cannabis when they try to navigate the condition. There's so many untapped potential in medical cannabis.
So much untapped. You know, if you think that, you know, medical cannabis is working within your endocannabinoid system, you know, and that's a minefield as well. You know, again, I had no clue about any of this before I joined the company. So actually, if we can talk about those things and, you know, the conditions that can help, you know, through that endocannabinoid system, you know, we could help so many more people that don't know, that are maybe taking pills after pills, or one pill for this, but then you've got to take another pill to counteract the side effect or line your stomach for this one. You know, let's have those conversations. You know, we're here to discuss that, to listen. Yeah.
So Karen, talk to me about supply, because I know from being around in the sector for quite a while that supply chains in the medical cannabis sector are particularly difficult. Where do you see it at the moment with Lyphe?
We had a horrific year last year with supply chain and again the MHRA and labelling. We have been really fortunate that we are now working with some UK suppliers. You know, we've been really restricted, so we're in a really good place now.
That's great, because that must have been incredibly challenging.
It's so difficult, and difficult for us as a company, but also difficult for the patients, because they haven't been able to access the product. You know, to get one product 1 month and then not being able to get it the next month. So challenging. And, you know, it breaks our heart because we're not delivering that service that we wanted to. But, you know, we are really confident now that with the UK supply chain, we can cover all the bases.
That's it for today's episode of Lyphe in Focus. Thanks to Karen for joining me and sharing how Lyphe is making medical cannabis treatment simple, safe and supportive for patients across the UK. If you found this conversation useful, or you're interested in learning more about medical cannabis and how it's prescribed, head over to lyphe.com. You'll find clear information, patient guides and details about how to start your own treatment journey. Make sure you subscribe to the show for more episodes where we'll be diving into the realities of medical cannabis, patient care and the future of this growing field. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.